Hello, I'm Konrad Marshall, host of Good Weekend Talks. After a short summer break, we'll be back in mid-January 2026 with Season 7 of the podcast. We've got plenty of exciting interviews booked in the calendar already, but during this end-of-year break, we wanted to keep your feed full by sharing a few of our most popular episodes from 2025, including this chat with the author Helen Garner. Garner had a huge 2025, finding new audiences worldwide courtesy of her inclusion in Dua Lipa's book club, and then releasing The Mushroom Tapes, an account of the murder trial of Erin Patterson compiled with fellow true crime scribes Sarah Krasnostein and Chloe Hooper. But before all of that, she started the year basking in a warmer glow, following the release of The Season, a book that follows her teenage grandson as he plays an AFL season for the Flemington Colts under-16s. Garner tagged along to his training and games and talked about his life and hers. She describes it as a record of a season they spent together, in quotes, before he turns into a man and I die. As someone who rarely felt more alive than running around on a footy field in the under-16s, I was so happy to have this chat with an Australian literary icon about a book that has little to do with death and which she calls a hymn to the decency of life. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
What was football or sport in your life growing up? Like, did sport or footy have an important place as a kid or an adolescent to you?
No, I wasn't sporty at all. Well, I went to a school where you had to play sport, a girls' school, and so I was obliged to play hockey, which I didn't like much, and played tennis. That was fun. But no, I had one sister in particular who was very sporty and really good at it, so she could stay in the limelight out there in the family, and I just lay on the bed and read a book, basically. And
fandom wasn't a part of the household either?
No. Well, I come from Geelong, and I think my dad maybe was interested in the footy, but it's not something we talked about at the dinner table.
Now, you've had a lot to do with Ambrose, who's the central character in your book. You've lived next door to him your whole life, helped his whole life,
not mine.
Helped raise him. We actually have that situation in my household. I live in a house that was built by my dad on the backyard of
brilliant.
Where I grew up.
Yeah, wow.
And Mum still lives in the old house out front, and it means that she can kind of babysit and keep an eye on my son, Charlie, her grandson, and we can kind of keep an eye on her in return. And it's actually a kind of great way to live. Do you reckon is it something that people should or could sort of consider more, this idea of the family compound?
Oh, I really think so. I mean, if you get on with your parents, I mean, if things are prickly with them, it probably wouldn't work. But these have been the 25 happiest years of my life, I think, living just slightly separate from the sort of, as it were, throbbing heart of the family. But I eat with them most nights, and I guess I have helped to raise them, and I've been able to. I think of it as that I've come to I came to a time in my life where what I wanted to do was be useful and serve, rather than putting myself at the front. When my third marriage broke up, I thought, okay, well, that's that. I've given that my best shot, and so now I'll find out some other forms of love that there are.
There was 6 kids in your family growing up, and only one was a boy? One of your siblings?
There were 5 girls and 1 boy.
And your only child was a girl, so you sort of come from girl world, but you have these 2 grandsons. You've sort of described them as different creatures. When did you first sense that difference in the way boys are than girls are, watching them up close as your grandsons?
Well, I've actually got 3 grandchildren, and the eldest one's a girl. And I think in the book I say that she and I understood each other at first glance.
Yes.
Because, as you say, I come from girl land. But when the boys turned up, I'm tempted to say it was from day one. It felt different, but it would be very hard to articulate that how I felt. But as they grew up next door, I just watched their. I suppose, because I come from that generation that's a feminist generation, and we sort of fought blokes, and there was a lot of fighting going on, and a lot of a lot of analysis of life that was a strongly feminist one. And one thing that distresses me actually about modern talking about these matters is that the phrase toxic masculinity gets a bit too much airplay. I think the word, the two words have got glued together.
Yes.
There's masculinity and there's toxic masculinity, but the two words have somehow got gummed together. And I do think that men and boys have, in many ways, have got a bad rap that they don't deserve.
It's funny you mentioned that the book, reading it all the way through, it sort of reminded me of Jane Campion's films a little bit. Like, I interviewed her 18 months or so ago, and she said that sensitivity is not something that one gender owns. And in your words in the book, it was, I don't know, they were really tender sort of creatures, even in the throes of sort of battle on the field in these physical contests.
I'm so glad about Jane. Well, yeah, Jane and I actually agree on quite a few matters. I haven't seen her for many years now, but we've worked together. I think the world of her. She's a marvellous director. And I feel that strongly, that I learnt about the delicacy of boys and their hurtability, how and it's, from a certain age onwards, that they have to sort of front up into manliness in a way that can seem distorting. And I don't just mean to the super sensitive ones, but you just see this sort of hardening that happens to boys, and it's sometimes painful to witness.
Mm. The opposite's also true, of course. I love the sort of self-awareness of Ambrose about like why he plays football and like what he gets out of it, that violence. There are so many statements or sections in the book where he talks about getting his anger out on the field, and it rang true for me, and I reckon it will for a lot of boys who played footy. I recognised in myself very early on that I loved tackling way more than kicking a goal. I loved the act of kind of hurting a person a little bit.
Well, see, that's something that I learnt during that season. And, well, see, I mean, our family, the family that I joined when I lived next door to my daughter and her gang and her husband, was about the Western Bulldogs. And
yes.
I've never previously had that really sort of passionate attachment to a team. And I realised when I moved in next to them that if I didn't get real about footy, I was going to miss out on a hell of a lot of this sort of action and jokes and thoughts and talks.
Well, it's funny, you mentioned, I've heard you mention a few times this photo that you have on your phone. Is it the one of Marcus Bontempelli with, is it the photo of Marcus Bontempelli, the Bulldogs captain, with Josh Bruce,
yes.
sort of the footballer leaning his head on his shoulder?
That's the one.
Bruce has just done his knee.
He's done his knee that had already been repaired, and but Bontempelli and the team has just been thrashed, and they're coming off the field with their heads hanging low, and Josh Bruce is in a lot of pain and distress because of what's just happened to him, and Bontempelli's got his arm around his shoulder and his head kind of resting against his shoulder, and it's just a beautiful shot. And I'm in this reading group, and we've read Homer, we've read the Iliad twice actually,
oh, wow.
and Virgil and old poems that are about war and warriors and men's behaviour under huge pressure. And that when I saw that photo, I thought, God, that's like something out of one of those tales. I actually found a line, he helped his captain towards his shelter. Just a simple statement like that, and you could see that was what was happening. And I find that terribly moving. I know what it was. It was about loving violence, the thing that you said. Well, you see, I was surprised when I would ask Ambrose questions about things like that. I was surprised that he did give me such thoughtful answers, because he's a thoughtful guy, but I didn't know how it would be possible to sort of articulate those things. But quite bluntly, he says things like, well, I love tackling, I said, why? Why do you love tackling? He says, well, because it's inflicting physical harm, but without any hard feelings.
Yeah.
And he said, and, he actually said this, you hear the guy groan, but then he gets up and the game goes on, and afterwards no one gives it another thought. And so as a girl and as a woman, that is sort of astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I found sort of thrilling, but not just thrilling because it was violent, but because it seems that there are different registers on which people function in sport, and I believe that this is why sport was invented, or why it developed, because
to sublimate those desires.
Well, to give that urge to violence, and I don't like the word violence because it's got such a negative connotation. I wish there was another word that was sort of free of disapproval, just so I could use it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I when Ambrose would talk about that, I'd see, because I'm a girl, I don't like to get hurt, and I often would think that I would love to hurt somebody, but I would never do it in an ordinary life.
I always felt like it was a consequence-free environment to engage those that side of yourself. Like I might hurt someone in a tackle, but I'm not maiming them. I'm not out to
No, you're not trying to actually kill them.
No,
are you?
and they're not trying to kill me. And you'd have fights on the field, but again, they're scuffles where you can push and shove and yell at someone, but it gets broken up. You're not getting king hit or laid out.
So when you do see in a game somebody really lose their shit, and commit a violent act, I mean, it's really shocking because it does break a rule, and everybody knows that rule is there. It's not exactly articulated, or not in a way that the crowd quite knows. But in the book, there's a moment where I saw Bailey Smith of the Western Bulldogs. What do you call it when you hit someone with your head?
He headbutted
the
long
Tui.
tower.
Yeah. And when I saw it happen, I was terribly shocked because it's a very shocking thing to hit someone with your head.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems completely insane. And the whistle blew, and Tui staggered back, like, you could see this big mark on his forehead. It was real. And then at the end of the game, the siren goes, and I saw Tui walking along with his hand out. And I thought, he's going to shake hands with the guy who just did that to him. And he walks up to Bailey Smith, and Bailey Smith turns around, sees him coming and smiles at him. They smile at each other. They warmly shake hands. Then they put their arms around each other's shoulders and walk off laughing. And with the fact that they were laughing completely bowled me over. And I thought, this is some thing in the world of men that is, to me, kind of alarming and yet very admirable.
Yeah. What was quite funny today on the way in to do this interview, I was riding up the escalator at Southern Cross Station, and I got to the top, and there was a poster ad for like one of those energy drinks, and it was Bailey Smith, and he's flexing, and the statement was "Unleash the Beast." That is too
I've
perfect.
seen that ad. It's fabulous because, I mean, really, he's I'm so sorry he's gone to another team.
I know. To Geelong at that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Homer and Virgil before, and there is this ancient kind of heroic aspect to footy as you describe it at times in the book. And it was funny because I sort of knew once you were going along that path, I felt like she's going to mention Bontempelli because not only is he sort of such a beautiful player, but he kind of looks like a Roman centurion. Like he's got that whole bearing. I just wonder, when you were writing that stuff, having not written about football before and in this sort of sentimental tones, did you have to ever check yourself? Am I going too far? Am I seduced? Have I drunk the Kool-Aid?
Sort of worshipful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did try to check that because I didn't want to make a fool of myself. I didn't want to romanticize it beyond all bounds. But I wanted to talk about the extreme emotion that people feel about footy and how deep it goes in people. And so I mean, even to the point of it's having a kind of religious element.
Yeah.
And when I first thought that, I thought, oh, geez, hell, watch yourself. This is really going down the gurgler here. But when I mentioned it to people, even these really hard-boiled footy nuts, none of them would say, oh, come off it.
Yeah,
They would just nod. And I really do think that the highly ritualised nature of the game, or especially of behaviour around the game, like, for example, how the umpire walks on with one arm stretched above his head with the ball in his hand. It's like something out of I don't know, it's sort of magnificent, and it just for a moment stills everybody before everyone goes berserk and starts screaming and yelling.
One of the best sports books I ever read was Get Her Off the Pitch by Lynn Truss, and she was this features writer thrown into covering sport almost as kind of an experiment or a punishment by her editor, and she ended up covering kind of heavyweight boxing matches at Madison Square Garden and World Cup soccer and Agassi at Wimbledon and stuff, and her insights were amazing because they came from a kind of place of not ignorance but unfamiliarity with those endeavours, and your book kind of reminded me of that. And I just wonder, is there an advantage, or did you feel there was an advantage in coming to a topic unburdened by all of that, the expertise that the average fan might have built up over?
Oh,
life?
Absolutely, I did. But it took me a while to realise that I was in an advantageous position by being rather ignorant. I heard this guy being interviewed on the radio before I started writing the book, and he'd written he's a French guy, and he had written a book about a certain psych hospital which is on a boat on the River Seine in Paris. And he'd gone there and sort of hung out there and written about it. And the journalist said to him, what on earth made you interested in this strange topic? And he said, ignorance and curiosity. And when he said that, I thought, yeah, that's what it's all about. For me, writing, but you see, because I did feel that I was in a sense trespassing on a territory that I knew that was sort of manly, and I expected. I knew that my ignorance was, I can follow a game easily, but I don't understand the finer points of the rules, and I thought, I can make a fool of myself here. And I thought, okay, well, what's the right thing to do? As a journalist, I would have thought, okay, well, before I do this, I better go and do a bit of research. And I was overwhelmed by a feeling of reluctance and boredom.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to ask people as the things arise.
The questions that interest you in the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, the sub rule, or what is it?
I love that part in the book.
Well, I just thought. And I realised once I stopped being ashamed of my ignorance, I thought, hey, wait a minute, I can build this into the story and it'll make it funny. And because it's already obviously a Nana's book about footy, like I'm 82 and I don't understand these things, and there's no point pretending I do. So I had a lot of fun asking people, what the hell is I didn't ask this, what is a 50-50 ruck tap? And I still don't know, so don't tell me if you know. But there are some things I thought it was so, because the thing about it is people's faces would light up. If I said, oh, listen, I'm writing a book about footy, and people go, ho-hum. And one guy said to me, a friend said, oh, I've actually been to every Essendon game since I was 11 with the same 4 people.
Wow.
And I said, great, you can explain to me the changes in the sub-rule. And his eyes spark up and he straightens his spine and he says, I can and I will. And so he did. He gave me a crystalline explanation, and I thought, cool, now I understand the sub-rule. And I went home feeling really pleased with myself, and I hadn't, of course, written down any of it. And when I woke up the next morning, it was gone.
Yeah.
I didn't remember a single thing he'd said. And so I thought, okay, well, I am getting a bit old and getting a bit of cognitive decline, so I'll just play that card.
It's a very non-judgmental book as well. Like, if someone hears the award-winning writer is going to wade into this world and write about it, the natural suspicion is that they might be drifting to a polemical sort of analysis of footy, the very Guardian take on toxic masculinity, for instance, in sport. Did you have to resist at all? Like, were there aspects of the game that you found foolish or dangerous or overblown, and you had to sort of resile from making those statements? Because it was a very fond rendering.
Yeah. Well, of course, there are aspects of it. People get hurt.
Yep.
And the whole thing about head injuries is really scary.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that can be fixed. I mean, I think I wanted to make it clear that I was aware of those risks, but I didn't want to wade in there and start being polemical. That's one thing I didn't want to do, and I made up my mind right at the start I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So when that friend of mine from Sydney got in touch with me and said, "Oh, I believe you're writing about AFL," and she's a person who worked on the Royal Commission into child abuse in institutions.
Wow.
And which was a grueling and gruesome couple of years in her life. And she said, she's a lawyer, and she says, we have had a lot of trouble getting any, entry into the AFL to talk about these things. And she said, I wonder if you would like to talk about that. And that was a very important moment to me.
Mm.
My immediate response, it was kind of like there was a fork in the road. I would have had to change the whole nature of the book if I'd said yes.
Yeah.
She would have given me a lot of information that I would have found extremely distressing and needing attention. But I thought, no, that's going to push this book right off the track that it's on and that I want it to be on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said no. And she's a rational person. She understood why I said no. And I think she was also really pleased because I put in the bit about how when she was working at the Royal Commission, she used to play the piano well before she went into law. And she was so devastated by what she heard each day. She didn't know how she was going to get through it, the job.
Yeah.
She told me she was in Glebe Books, a good bookshop in Sydney, and she saw a book of Mozart's piano works and she bought it. So she took this book home and she said every night when I got back from the hearing, I would sit down and I would work my way through one of those sonatas. And that in a sense, I was going to say got me off a hook. I mean that it took me, it allowed me to stay on track in the book. There's a lot more to be said about that, I guess.
When you did sit down to write the book, I feel like I heard somewhere in an interview with you that you might have had like 20 false starts, like you couldn't quite figure it out. And that stunned me because the book starts and finishes with such a natural voice throughout and such sort of clarity about where you're going and what it is. Do you, and this is just the writer question, but do you rewrite compulsively, or were you just stuck on figuring out the voice at the beginning and then it flowed?
Yeah, finding the voice is the thing. But you see, I didn't really know what sort of book it was. I didn't know where I was going to stand to tell it. And so the false starts were all me trying to they were all in the past tense, for one.
Okay.
And right. I was talking about how I'd always thought about football or how football had struck me or why I hadn't been interested in it. But I thought, bloody hell, this is just really boring. What am I scared of? I'm scared of something. And you know what switched it? I switched to present tense.
Yeah, okay.
And as soon as I moved to present tense, the whole thing took off. And I thought, okay, that's what this is about. This is about this season. It's not about what I thought in 1965 about football. It's about this season, and I'm going to tell it in a diary-like way. I'll do it. This happened, and then it was Thursday, and then Saturday came, and like that. So once I did that, I could hardly keep up with it because it had this it had a big sort of momentum which was coming out of those boys. What I gained from watching that, I can hardly express what I got from it. Just the sort of joy of it and the joy of their concentration. That's another thing I learned about men. You guys have got tunnel vision, and it's always driven me crazy about men. I mean, that's
sure.
but I see now it's more practical application. Just that the way that I'd be standing around before the training started, and the kids would arrive, the boys would arrive, they'd get off their bike and they'd take off their backpack and they'd just sling their bike across the ground, and it would skid across the ground, and they'd just chuck their bag, and without looking, they just went boom, boom, and then walked straight onto the field. And of course, you know, as a mother, I think, oh, you untidy fellows, pick those up at once. But that's, I think I put in the book that's out of all the things that I know about men, that's the one that makes me most feel that I'm a woman.
I did like that passage where you had to resist the urge to go and get Ampy's phone up off the ground.
Yes,
when
he threw it on the ground. It was in the grass, and I was grinding my teeth to stop myself from picking it up.
I sense a lot of envy throughout these pages, often of just sort of the youth and vibrancy of these boys. But what about the physical exhilaration that they get to experience in playing football?
Oh, boy.
Did you have envy of that?
Oh, you're kidding? I was green with envy. I writhed with envy three times a week. But training, particularly training, I loved watching training. I couldn't get there fast enough. And just the watching a team form itself, that I think that's the basic, well, I don't know, there's on a lot of levels. The development that I saw was it was kind of a moral development, and I think coaching is a fascinating thing to me. How much of it is moral
well, that was
training.
A great element of the book, actually. A good fortune for you, really, in that the coach was new, and so he had to mould them sort of in his own image or shape them from whatever they had been in the past to something new, and you got to see that progression. Yes,
and to see how they respected him and how he gained their respect and how funny he was with them.
Yeah.
And was that in the grand final section of the book.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I won't say anything. I realised that's what I was watching in the grand final. I had this sense that there was a sort of fabric, that the team had created a fabric, and the fabric was holding them together, and it was holding. It was strong enough to hold them. And I could never have nutted that out intellectually. It was almost as if I could see it. Yeah. And, of course, the other thing about the book is that I'm used to writing about tragic things. Yeah. And court cases and murder trials and things like that. So I think that's one of the things that was so exhilarating about the season, was that I didn't have to deal with, that kind of grief-stricken, wounded terribleness that I've written about in other books.
Yes, absolutely. What surprised you or stood out to you about the way the book's been received? I mean, it's been out for a little while now. You must have had endless conversations about it.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I never knew. When we were trying to figure out what was going to go on the cover, there was a photo I wanted to have on the cover, and it was taken in behind the boys in the huddle. You can see all these big dirty shoulders, and then right between the heads you can see a boy bellowing, he's just roaring. And I was very close up of shoulders and faces, and I loved it. But the publisher said to me, "Look, Hal," he said, we got to sell this book to two whole readerships. We've got to sell it to people who are already readers of you, and they'll read anything you write, and they don't know anything about footy. And we've got to sell it to people who know everything about footy and have never heard of you. Mm-hmm. So I thought, all right. So I had to change it. They changed it to make it more I was nearly going to say melodious, harmonious.
How did Ambi feel about being the subject in the end? What did he think of the words that you put together on the page?
Well, I was very aware of that I thought, well, this could be awkward for him because he was going to be a bigger character than any of the other guys in the team. And so I tried to tread lightly in that regard.
Did he have veto rights, by the way? Over,
I probably would have given him a veto right if he'd really hated something I'd done or was, that it had put him in an awkward spot. I totally didn't want to. I would have given him a veto right. But anyway, the day I left it, an early draft of it for him to read, I gave it to him and went about my business. And when I came home that evening, he was sitting out the back on the deck with his back to the door. And I thought, oh, my God, he hates it. What will I do now? And I stepped out the door and he turned around with this big, blissful smile on his face and he said, "Thanks, Hel. Thanks for writing it." And I thought, oh, that's so great. Once you get that kind of stamp, you sort of home and host,
Has it been fun talking to people about the book, given that it is so different than your other books?
Yeah, heaps of fun. It's more laughs in it than anything I've ever done. It was, in a way, it was sort of more fun to write than anything I've ever, because I was just getting this life force off these boys. The thing about the boys is that I don't think, except on the day when I became the oranges lady, and which was so fantastic for me, that was the only day that I ever got eye contact from any of the boys. When I held out the oranges.
On that day. What do I do? How do I do?
No, I said to my oranges. I said to my daughter. My daughter said, "Oh, why don't you do the oranges today?" Because she normally wouldn't. And I go, "What? Me do the oranges? How do you do it?" And she goes, "Oh, how do you think you do it? You just get the oranges and take them out and hold them out." Yeah, but they didn't. I didn't. I stood back a lot. I was just there with my notebook, and I don't think I got eye contact from any of them right through the season, and that was fine with me. Because you know what it is when you're a journalist, and you wish you would be invisible.
Yep, you've sort of described in the book how you felt partly invisible in that you're an old lady.
Yeah,
and they're young boys. Like you had double invisibility as like the journo and then who you are.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Actually, the old lady card is one that's really good to play. I mean, it gets you out of all sorts of situations that you just aren't seen. And sometimes, once or twice when there was the whole spitting scandal, and I wanted to hear what the coach was going to say to them about that. And I asked him, I said, can I come in closer tonight when you talk to the boys about the spit? Because the person who spat got suspended for 2 weeks and he was one of their best players. And he said, sure. So I just got my notebook and I went in there and I was standing behind him and I was standing, twice as close as I am to you now. And they just, it was kind of like I didn't exist. It was like I was a ghost or something. It was really amazing. And I felt so grateful to be that close to them while they were, this kid was having an ethical lesson taught to him and it was done with great delicacy. And the funny thing about it is several people have said to me that was the scene that made them cry in the book. Blokes have said this to me. Because the boy has to make a speech and he makes it kind of an awkward speech and then he kind of looks helplessly at the coach and the coach nods severely and the boy walks back to the line of guys and they just part to let him come back into the group. And one journalist in Sydney said, I just cried about that. And when he was telling me about it on the radio, he sort of choked up, and because that made me choke up, so it was hopeless.
One last question now. Has pre-season training started for the under-17s Colts? And if so, like, have you been there or will you be there? Will you be on the sidelines again just as a fan
the
this year?
unfortunate thing is there is not an under-18 team. They couldn't field one. There weren't enough, only 4 guys turned up to play. And it's a long story. There's been a bit of, the club's had a bit of disturbance in it over years past, and they've not been able to field senior teams. And so most of the boys after under 16, either they went on, continued to play with under 16s, but the ones who were too old have had to go to different clubs. So my grandson's gone to Yarraville.
Okay. Will you be fronting up and watching
Oh,
Yarraville?
yeah, I think so, but I doubt whether I'll be there quite so fanatically because, it's quite tiring. I'm playing the old lady card.
Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful book, a wonderful snapshot of a season. Thanks so much for coming in and chatting with us about it on Good Weekend Talks.
Thank you very much.
That was author Helen Garner in conversation with Konrad Marshall for Good Weekend Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Season 7 starts on January 17. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. Good Weekend Talks is produced by Konrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery, with technical assistance from Chi Wong, Cormac Lally and Josh Towers. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend.